You're listening to CreepGeeks Podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/CheapGeek. So it begins again. Welcome back to CreepGeeks Podcast. This is episode number 142.
Lochness Monster is a giant eel, space crimes, the Mystery X-37B space plane, and little people return to the reservation.
Yeah.
Load it.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it begins again, and we're back, and thank you very much for tuning in to the CreepGeeks Podcast. If you're your very first time tuning into the podcast, thank you very much. If it's not, you've been with us the whole time, we really do appreciate it. So anyway, this podcast is about all sorts of cool things that we find and talk about on the internet. And what else is this podcast all about?
Well, we're an offbeat news podcast that takes a lighthearted approach to the paranormal, cryptid, strange, the silly, and trending tech topics circulating the web, broadcasting paranormal news and fun stories from our underground bunker in the mountains of western North Carolina.
Nice.
Yeah.
So anyway, been around the block a little bit doing this kind of podcasting thing, doing some talking about stuff, and what we found is that news is interesting, and when you look for the weird stuff, you can definitely find it, and that's what this podcast does. Find stuff that we find interesting.
And who are we?
We are the CreepGeeks Podcast. Or you want my name?
Yeah.
My government name is Greg.
No.
And your government name is Omi. Actually, it's not true. I'm Greg, and this is Omi, and we're back again, episode number 142 of the podcast. And so this is the part of the podcast where we actually talk about things that you can do to help support the podcast, because that's what you have to do in order to get the podcast to grow.
Yes.
That's the goal. So, a couple different ways you can support the podcast. We actually have a telephone number that you can call and leave us a message if you'd like to share a story or something that happened to you or an experience maybe with the podcast. And if you want to remain anonymous, we can certainly do that. That phone number is
575-208-4025.
Yes, we have a couple different ways that you can listen to the podcast. You can listen to the podcast on any major podcast playing platform, like Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio,
Google Play Podcasts.
Google Play Music, what else?
Pandora,
Spotify,
Player FM,
Stitcher, pretty much
iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio, pretty much anywhere you can listen to a podcast, you can listen to this podcast, and we do appreciate it if you do. Now, you can also listen to the podcast on Facebook. We have a really active Facebook group called the CreepGeeks Podcast. Right?
That's our Facebook page.
We have a page and a group. We have both, but it pretty much what it boils down to is that we're active.
Yes.
And people are active too. They like to share there. So if you want to do that, you can certainly tune in and do that. We also have our website, CreepGeeks.com, where you can find our latest and greatest podcast episode.
And you can find us on YouTube.
Yes. And we have a contact form on our website, CreepGeeks.com, where if you'd like to share your story there, you certainly can. That'd be great.
And we'll put links to all of these in the show notes.
Yes. And also, if you follow us on Instagram, which is CreepGeeks, what is it? CreepGeeks Pod?
No.
See, I always get Twitter and Instagram confused. I'm pretty sure it's creep underscore geeks.
In fact, I need to change it.
Yeah. Anyway.
So it's
we're on Instagram.
_geeks.
There you go. Creep
Instagram.
underscore, I keep saying underscore geeks.
And we are on Twitter as CreepGeeks Pod.
There you go. So I always get those two confused. And we're very active in the social media, the social stuff. So if you want to leave us a message there, do a direct message, you can certainly do that. And we also have something new and exciting that just got launched the other day, courtesy of Omi.
That's the official CreepGeeks swag store.
What?
Yes.
Because we've literally had 3 to 4 people ask us about swag. And so
we're putting some of our smaller swag items up on the store and seeing how things go. Right now, you can actually get our very, very
stickers.
Our very limited edition stickers.
Yes.
That you can only normally find at events that we are at.
Yes.
So limited edition stickers from
Buttons.
the CreepGeeks Podcast, as well as our new buttons.
Yes. And other stuff. So you should give it a whirl.
Yes.
We do have a link in our show notes if you'd like to go to the store and check it out. It's on Facebook as well. Mm-hmm. And our website. It's pretty cool. So if you see anything that you like there, you can buy it there. And if for whatever reason you have a hard time, send us a direct message and we'll see what we can do for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we can also do to support the podcast, aside from leave a rating, because ratings help podcasts grow, is the next time you buy something off Amazon, if you use our link, it'll help us. See, because what happens is if you're an Amazon affiliate, you get a small percentage. And what it does for you, it doesn't change your cost at all. It doesn't really cost anything. You just use the link, you buy whatever you're going to buy, and a small percentage goes back to the show, which allows us to keep the coffee flowing and gas in the Albino Rhino.
And that link is amazon.com/shop/cheapgeek.
Yes, and the Albino Rhino is our DIY adventure camper mobile investigation machine. We use that. It has a big old has a queen size bed in the back, cabinets for storage and cooking and all that good stuff. And we use it when we actually go out and investigate. Because not only do we talk about this stuff on the internets that we see and experience, we're part-time paranormal investigators and cryptid researchers as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, that's nice.
What you saw?
What? Well, we do. And we use that camper van to go out and actually do that sort of thing. So it's kind of a good thing. Works out pretty well for us. And, yeah. And if you see it going down the road and you want to, communicate with us, don't come flying up beside us waving all crazy.
At 70 miles an hour.
Yeah. Makes me think the van's going to blow up or something. So that has happened to us. Yeah. Because we actually have a sign on it. So anyway, there you go. Yeah. Now, as we do with each one of our podcasts, when we absolutely remember, which is pretty good so far, about 90% up on that sort of thing, we'd like to start the podcast with an interesting random factoid. Yeah. And this interesting random factoid has to do with hurricanes, because at the time of this particular podcast, we have Hurricane Dorian out there trying to do all sorts of crazy stuff.
Actually, we don't know what it's trying to do,
Yeah,
but it's
I don't
going
even
pretty
know.
slow.
I'm not sure if it's a hurricane or a tropical storm at this point or what. Because in our underground bunker in western North Carolina, hurricanes have no effect on us.
Yes.
Yeah. But it definitely has had an effect on places like the Grand Bahamas and things like that. It's been pretty sketchy. So it's moving up the East Coast. So anyway, with that, we decided we would do a couple hurricane-related interesting random factoids. Yeah. You ready?
Sure.
Okay. Let me see if I have some hurricane music. I don't really have any hurricane music. Let's see. Let's play some kind of futuristic hurricane music. Here we go. This will be hurricane music right here.
That's too peaceful.
Yeah, hold on, let me find something. So, how about this? No, here we go. I don't know. I don't really have any good hurricane music.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Futuristic. There we go. We're going to use that.
10 incredibly strange facts about hurricanes.
Yes.
So,
Let's do the first one. This is the big one. You ready?
yeah.
Hurricane names get retired. Did you know that?
Oh, yes.
No, you didn't.
I forgot because it's been so long since we lived near a coastal region.
Yes.
But yeah, I do remember that certain names have been retired.
Yes.
Yeah.
It looks like Dorian's going to be retired because the reason why they retire a hurricane is sadly because it's caused major damage or expensive type, destruction and or physical death.
So is that like the major rule?
It seems to be.
Okay.
So, yeah. So Hurricane Dorian so far has obliterated parts of the northwestern Bahamas.
Oh, wow.
And the devastation there will likely lead to the name Dorian being retired.
Huh.
And since it's likely going to cause problems in the U.S. as well, it seems to make sense. This is similar to what happened to another retired hurricane named Matthew.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
remember Matthew.
So since Hurricane Dorian has already been a destructive and notable storm, as a result, the name Dorian will likely be retired from the future so that it won't use it. So when you have the Atlantic hurricane name after 2019, which is this year, they won't use it again. And since Dorian was a Category 5 when it made landfall in the Abaco Islands in the Bahamas with sustained winds over 185 miles per hour, Yeah, it was the strongest hurricane on record to make landfall in the Bahamas.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And it also made landfall in Grand Bahama Island with winds of up to 185 miles per hour. And it was also the first Category 5 hurricane to make landfall there as well. And then it stalled and basically beat the northwestern Bahamas for about 48 hours. So it's been a pretty severe storm.
There was that crazy video I saw on Facebook where it was like people on the second or third story of their house, and the water was all the way up past one whole floor.
Yes, they got a lot of storm surge because it was the slowest moving major hurricane over any 24-hour period since they began taking records back in 1851.
That's scary.
So this thing just sat there and just dumped rain, brought the storm surge in, and just completely pounded the Bahamas there.
Yeah.
So there's our upbeat, interesting, random factoid.
That's terrible.
Right. Now here, let's get on to 10 incredibly strange facts about hurricanes.
Hopefully these are a lot better.
Yeah, I hope so. I try to pick some upbeat storm hurricane type facts, but we're probably not going to go through all of them. We'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
I thought this was actually kind of funny. Here's number 10. Walmart customers stock up on Pop-Tarts and beer.
That's... Okay.
Heck yeah, that makes sense, right?
The Pop-Tarts do.
Yeah. Gotta have beer. Now, see, here's the deal. Coming from the East Coast in Virginia, where I grew up, we have hurricanes all the time and all year. Sometimes they hit us, and sometimes they didn't. Mostly they didn't.
Yeah.
We would prepare for the hurricane by storing lots of water, Doritos, snacks, stuff like that.
See,
completely what you're not supposed to do for an actual storm.
For us, it was ramen, Pop-Tarts, and
beer, because you went to Walmart's.
No.
Yeah.
Ramen, Pop-Tarts, and then always Ritz crackers.
Always.
Always.
Good old crackers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like canned meat, you know?
Canned meat.
So.
My favorite when we travel. So enjoy your canned meat. So when the Hurricane Francis was about to hit Florida, Walmart jumped into action. They had mountains of data on their customers and basically every other aspect of their lives. And with thousands of people in jeopardy, Walmart knew they had a responsibility.
Okay.
They had to figure out how to make a real quick buck from it. So they looked at their customer data to predict their behavior and discovered that their customers have a strange reaction when a storm is about to hit. Instead of water or flashlights, the biggest things that people stocked up on were beer and strawberry-flavored Pop-Tarts. Nice.
Well, strawberry... Those are like the universally accepted Pop-Tarts.
Strawberry-flavored Pop-Tarts are the tastiest.
Well, the ones with the frosting on them.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
If you don't get the ones with the frosting on them, what's the point?
The cereal killer.
I mean, if you're going to eat a Pop-Tart, you might as well... Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know? That's like taking the icing off the cake and just eating the cake.
That's true.
Yeah.
But
so if you're a weirdo out there who likes just the cake and not the icing and the cake together, leave us a message.
Would you stop?
You can send us an email at contacts@CreepGeek.
Contact at CreepGeeks.com.
Yeah. And we will return your email message with "You're a freaking weirdo."
Now, the more it
I
goes...
happen to know somebody who likes cake like that.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it's Caitlin.
I think it's interesting, though, because the breakdown in this little segment for the Pop-Tarts and beer is that this isn't a natural human instinct. It only happens to U.S. Walmart customers because when Costco did a survey on their customers in Hawaii, they found that beer sales actually plummeted.
Yeah, because you got to pay to get into Costco.
That's true.
You're like, quick, let's go to Costco and get 75 cases of beer when you really only need one.
I'm pretty curious if this is like a regional reaction. Like maybe in South Carolina, it's blueberry Pop-Tarts and something else, you know?
Probably not. I mean, they said that their Pop-Tart sales went up over 700%.
Oh, and Gatorade. That was a big thing in my household. Gatorade, Sprite, and yeah.
Now at Costco, not only did they not stock up on beer, they stocked up on water batteries. You know, things like that would help you survive.
Yeah.
I guess that's what you get. If you got to like pay for a membership or something, you're probably going to
get the nice bread and the nice batteries.
That's what they're doing.
So
is that, you know, since they have to pay the Costco membership every year, they want to make sure they're around to use it for next year or when it expires, right? So for number 9, FEMA uses Waffle Houses to measure disaster recovery.
I heard this as a conspiracy theory a while back.
According to this website, listverse.com, which we have a link in our show notes, It says FEMA has a strange way of checking out how the nation's disaster recovery is going. When they can't get clear information, they don't necessarily bother sending in a team to check how the community's doing. They just call the local Waffle House.
That's
and it says,
crazy.
believe it or not, this is actually FEMA's standard system now. Waffle Houses almost exclusively operate in hurricane areas, and they're uniquely willing to make their minimum wage employees endanger their lives by working through a storm with the power of a generator.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so ever since 2012, FEMA has been paying Waffle House to report the status of their stores to the agency directly.
And there's a sublink to verify the authenticity of that statement.
Yes, and they have a 3-tiered system for measuring if an area has recovered. Areas are marked green if the local Waffle House is fully open, yellow if they're working off a limited menu, and red if the area is so dangerous that even the Waffle House isn't willing to risk its employees' lives to make sure that drunk people can get an all-star breakfast at 3 a.m.
That's kind of insidious.
That's what they're doing. They're like, are we going to be open? Yes.
It's messed up.
Hey.
Is that why we tip good at Waffle House?
I don't know why we actually tip good. Well, we tip good at Waffle House because the ones that we go to, people know us.
Yeah.
And they talk to us and they treat us nice. And, you know, it's a, you know, and I know some people right now are like, Waffle Houses are disgusting. You know what? Whatever, man. It's good.
Yeah. And
especially
plus,
when you do that, the ghost investigation junk. It's like the only thing that's open. You either got like Waffle House, Denny's. What's the other one? IHOP.
Yeah.
That's about it.
A Village Inn if you're in like fancy states.
Or if you got money.
Yeah, that's true.
You got, but you know, most paranormal investigators and cryptid investigators that go out, I mean, come on. Waffle House for like $7, you can get a big old bowl of something.
Yeah.
And be just
It's
fine.
the working man's, like, working paranormal investigator's diner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And it's not that bad. I mean,
And this podcast is not sponsored by Waffle House, but
right,
it should
if
be.
you're listening, Waffle House. So they're like, we don't need to sponsor you. There's going to be plenty of drunk people come 3 o'clock in the morning. They're like, someone going to go, hello, Waffle House. What is your condition? Are you conditioned green, yellow, or red?
Oh, gosh.
And if the ladies like, sit down. You know, if it's really busy, then it's probably conditioned green.
But if they have,
It's funny. During Hurricane Isabel, right?
Yeah.
Power was down for days and all that stuff. And I actually wound up going to Waffle House because Waffle House was open.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was Waffle House. I might be a little off with this. And I had my girls with me, and there was like the street lights weren't working and all this. It was kind of a hairy situation
Yeah.
because there was not a can opener to be found, like a manual can opener. And we went to this place, and people were in there, and it was crowded, and people were loud and being rude. And the manager came and sat us first.
Oh.
Because we were nice.
Yeah.
We were standing there being polite, and because the lady was like, I don't know when we can get to you. It's like, hey, it's okay. Take your time. We get it. It's not a big deal. And then the manager came over and said, you guys come over here and set us. And I was like, you know, and people were like, hey, he just cut. And the manager's like, he's being nice, and he's going to get some. They're being very nice, and you guys are all being, you know, so pretty stressed out. And so, yeah, we had I don't remember what we had. I think it was Waffle House. I'm pretty sure it was Waffle House, you know.
And it's funny that you say that because the other major pancake and breakfast place that's open 24/7, down towards where you live during Hurricane Isabel, actually flooded because that was part of Princess Anne Road that got flooded.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so they were conditioned yellow.
Actually.
Pretty much. The people showed up, they opened the door, water came out, they put boots on, said, you go ahead and turn on the fryer. We got bacon in there.
No, because it was like over 11 inches of water in there.
Did you get the 12-inch boots?
Shut up.
They probably got boots for different hurricane storm levels. Okay, here we go. So I thought that was pretty interesting that there's actually a 3-tiered system for measuring if an area has recovered.
Via Waffle House.
There you go. If you're hung up in a storm area and you have cell phone service or whatever, and you need something to eat, try to call your local Waffle House and ask them what condition they're in.
Yeah.
And if they go, we don't know what you're talking about, say, are you conditioned green? Are you fully open? Are you conditioned yellow? And they'll be like, FEMA? Is that you, FEMA? So I'm sure like when the manager logs in, he has to set the condition. You know? To the computer.
Yeah.
I think you probably do it through the register and set the condition. Anyway. There you go. That was Number 9. We have 75 more to go. Okay.
Hurricanes got human names so that a meteorologist could make fun of people.
Yes.
And that's Australian meteorologist Clement Raig started the tradition of giving names to weather systems. Back then, though, things weren't quite as systematic as they are today. He just named storms after anything that popped into his head, which was usually a name of Greek gods and beautiful women.
Yeah.
After a while, he gave up on the Greek god thing and started giving hurricanes human names, entirely out of spite. So, some people felt that Raig had too high of an opinion of himself, and a few politicians started making jabs at him. As revenge, he named cyclones after them. For example, he named storms after Edmund Barton and Alfred Deakin, the first 2 prime ministers of Australia. Purely so that he could send out reports saying that Edmund Barton was wandering aimlessly about the Pacific and causing great distress.
Very nice. So this dude, so he could basically troll people he didn't like, got to name them.
That's some political satire, though.
Yes, so that's why we give hurricane human names today, because a bitter, angry Australian man thought it would be funny.
Yeah.
That is kind of funny.
Now, this wasn't always the case, because fact number 7 is the first U.S. hurricanes had names like Easy, Love, and Hal. But as you can guess, the names didn't exactly fit. Things like Hurricane Easy was described as the worst hurricane experienced in its area in more than 70 years. It devastated the town of Cedar Key, damaging 95% of the houses, and completely devastating the fishing community that propped up that city's economy. And the real problem was that originally they only had 26 names to choose from, so they ran out of names pretty fast. In the 1950s, they pretty much changed that process.
Nice.
Yeah.
So check this out. Number 6 says people are more likely to donate to hurricanes that share their first initial.
That's
So they're
weird.
like, So they get Hurricane Gregory. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and give him some dollars. I don't know. So researchers at the Red Cross Records found out that the donations went up for every case that people shared their first initial to a storm. The biggest effect was Hurricane Katrina. Likely because of all the media coverage it received. So normally people whose names start with K will make up 5% of the donors. But the K names made up 10% for the people who donated to her. I was going to say donated to Katrina. That was pretty nice.
Yeah.
Number 5, and I did know this one. Guards at the tomb of the unknown soldier stay at their posts during hurricanes.
Yep. Also blizzards.
Yes. They do not and will not desert their posts.
Yes.
Yes. So when a hurricane happens or hits, there's some people who don't get to evacuate. The men standing guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier are those people.
Yep.
They will not. So
During Hurricane Isabel, the guards were given special permission to hide inside the place if the winds went over 120 miles per hour. But they didn't do that.
What these guys did that are standing out there is they basically buttoned up, battened down the hatches, tightened things up, and just rocked it, man.
During Hurricane Sandy, which was pretty serious, a single guard volunteered to spend 23 hours facing the winds.
Yep.
Ouch. He risked his life to send out a symbolic message that the dead won't be abandoned.
Damn right. You don't leave your comrades behind. You don't abandon your post, and it's an ultimate respect.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That place is pretty serious business. So anyway, we're not going to do all of these. We're going to skip the ones that I think are boring, but we're going to get to number 3. Voodoo practitioners in New Orleans dropped by 90% after Hurricane Katrina.
Okay, this one's weird and kind of logical, but also kind of creepy.
Yeah.
Because of all the ways that life in New Orleans changed after Katrina, one of the biggest, most surprising impacts occurred in the voodoo community. Before the storm, New Orleans had 3,000 voodoo practitioners. I don't know how they came up with that statistic, but after the storm, that number was all the way down to 300.
Yes.
The people who performed voodoo were mostly low-income African Americans, the group that was hit hardest by the storm.
Yes.
A lot of them were stuck in New Orleans when Katrina hit, so a disproportionately large number of voodoo followers either died during the storm or whatever.
They left the city and just didn't come back.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the few who remained were pulled out of their subculture bubble. With so few practitioners left, they were forced to integrate into the rest of New Orleans culture. In many cases, they left their voodoo past behind.
Yeah.
There's a movement in New Orleans now to bring voodoo back, but 90% of the community has been wiped out, and most of the voodoo shops have been put out of business. After hundreds of years, the whole movement was decimated by a single storm.
Yeah. And if a lot of your customers go,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, it wrecked that whole culture. I was in Texas, years and years later, and a lot of the people in the residence that I was living in were still Katrina survivors.
Yeah. It was bad.
I mean...
And I still blame the local government for as bad as it became.
Yeah.
They took too long to call in the guard. They took too long to call in and ask for help. They didn't mobilize and use their resources to get people out. They didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was bad. Anyway, so and number one, the people, and this, I can't really say what kind of people they are, but you can just guess. People regularly write to the government asking them to nuke hurricanes.
That's not how
Many
this
people
works.
believe that you could fix this problem with nukes. So the government gets several letters every year from civilians going, I'm going to need you to go ahead and nuke that hurricane.
This is
So
like...
the government usually knocks this idea down, and they basically said, like they haven't done before, like in 1961, with the head of the U.S. Weather Bureau announced that he could imagine the possibility of someday exploding a nuclear bomb on a hurricane far at sea to see if it would work.
Oh, my gosh.
1959, a man named Jack Reed actually developed a full plan to do it. He was going to send a submarine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right into the storm so it could launch multiple nuclear missiles right into the eye of a hurricane, and he could believe that the nukes would displace the warm air in the hurricane's eye and replace it with colder air and weaken the storm. So Noah wasn't that thrilled about the idea.
Yes.
And said, needless to say, this is not a good idea. Yeah. And aside from the fact this almost certainly wouldn't work, it was in radioactive fallout through the trade winds across the world.
Exactly.
So you got this big spinning cyclonic action going on. Yeah.
And then it spins radioactive material into the trade winds,
Yes.
which go globally.
Yeah. And since most hurricanes originate from Sahara, that's where it's going to wind up again.
Yeah.
That's great.
This is kind of like we had a listener share a meme to us where this guy sincerely wants the U.S. Navy to deal with Hurricane Dorian.
Yeah. Why can't they take care of it?
That's not how this works.
Yeah, it's like, Mother Nature will win every time.
Yeah.
You know? Even though I think that the only two things left are on the planet, if it ever has, becomes like some sort of cataclysmic thing, is going to be humans and cockroaches, Mother Nature will win. That's what they do. Cockroaches and humans.
Okay.
That's what they do. Nothing. Sit around. All right. So anyway, there you go. We're going to take a second, and we're going to take a quick break on the old CreepGeeks podcast, and we'll be right back.
A podcast about curses, hexes, and maledictions. Cursed examines some of the most bizarre and mysterious events that have been documented throughout history. Whether it's regarding tales of voodoo, black magic, or simply a series of unfortunate events, I'll be telling you all kinds of strange tales. 3 episodes are readily available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and other popular apps. These episodes cover tales and stories from Manchac Swamp, the alleged curse of Ötzi the Iceman, and a story involving the Australian international soccer team and a scorned witch doctor. You can find out more about the show by visiting curse.com. That's C-V like voodoo, RSED.com. You can also follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Cursed Podcast. Again, that's C-V like voodoo, RSED Podcast. Hope to see you around. Thanks for listening.
Hey CreepGeeks fans, this is Toby Harford of Afterlife Paranormal. Join us October 5th for Carolina Paracon at the beautiful Saluda Shoals Park in Columbia, South Carolina. We have ghost hunting teams, cryptozoologists, and alien contactees, including Katie Stafford from Travel Channel's Ghosts of Morgan City, Psychic Lucky Belcamino, the Bigfoot Guys, alien contactee Eric Mitchell, demonologist James Anito, the CreepGeeks Podcast, and many more. We'll have 25 plus vendors, lectures on all paranormal topics, a psychic gallery reading, and a paranormal panel. Tickets are on sale now, and if you purchase before September 1st, you will be entered to win a ghost hunting kit and Carolina Paracon t-shirt. Find us on Facebook at Carolina Paracon. We hope to see you there.
Hello.
Hello?
And we're back.
Yes.
We're back on the CreepGeeks Podcast.
And I did want to add one more thing about the hurricane.
Okay, do I need special music for it?
Sure.
Okay, hold on. Let me find some special music.
You got spooky music?
Yeah, I think so. Hold on. Spooky music. Damn.
Okay. So we are a paranormal podcast, and one way we are going to tie in this hurricane to this podcast episode is the myth of the Gray Man, which is a South Carolina ghost said to warn locals before hurricanes. Now, the Gray Man is actually a myth that is in North and South Carolina. When I grew up in Virginia Beach, I was so close to the North Carolina border, we had our own version of the Gray Man. Basically, he would show up on the docks right before storms. And there's all sorts of different fables, like he was a sailor or he was an angry fisherman that passed away during a storm. In this particular case, the Gray Man has appeared before each of the 5 major hurricanes to make landfall on Pawleys Island. And wouldn't you know it, Pawleys Island, South Carolina, a few days ago, the Gray Man showed up in a video and in some pictures. And we're going to go ahead and put a link in the show notes to, I guess, the video and one of the photos. But the legends are that everyone in the Low Country has heard the story, especially when hurricanes or tropical storms begin to form around our area. It's always something you hear people bring up. He's a friendly entity. Not that it's a good thing to see him, but when someone does claim to see him, it gives us locals an idea of what we're about to deal with. So, that local lore is kind of cool.
Yes, he's a nice guy. He's not a boogeyman.
Yeah, I mean, it's spooky. There's different origin stories regarding him. A lovesick sailor returning from sea, or he's the original owner of Pawleys Island, George Pawley, who died in the 1700s. So, yeah.
Crazy.
Put it on just like an evening dress. Parade to the right, sway to the left. In the morning, everything is spent, and I make my way back home. Put it on just like an evening dress. Parade to the right.
So speaking of the Lochness Monster.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so here on the podcast, we talk about the Lochness Monster quite a bit because we like the Lochness Monster, or at least I do anyway. We like Lochness Monster, Thunderbirds, cryptid stuff like, you know,
Apparently.
Bigfoots, Sasquatches,
Apparently
little
he's
people,
my-
fae folk, all that kind of stuff. So,
He's my astrological cryptid.
well, very nice. Really?
Yeah.
I don't even know what mine was. I can't remember. I looked at that and was disgusted by it, and I'm like, whatever. So, okay, so we talked on the podcast before that, you know, there were some scientists who took, you know, samples of water, and they figured that they could test the water for DNA and try to get an idea what's in it. And by doing that, they could probably determine if the Loch Ness Monster is actually a thing.
Oh, we talked about this.
Yeah.
Like a while ago.
That's what I just said.
Like a while ago.
That's what I just said.
Hey.
I just said that. Yeah. So anyway, we did talk about it, and finally the results are in.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Do I have, like, drum roll music or something?
Would you stop?
I've been downloading music and putting it in the podcast thingy that we use to do the podcast. I can't really find anything. Let's see here. That's nice. Okay, anyway, so here we go. You ready?
Okay.
The wait's finally over. Scientists reveal their findings on the Loch Ness Monster. This is from Mysterious Universe. So the big announcement on the findings regarding the DNA of the Loch Ness Monster, and they finally have an answer. Researchers from New Zealand conducted the most extensive search yet of the famous Loch Ness in the Scottish Highlands by looking for the Loch Ness Monster. They took over 50 samples of water, and the conclusion is that the mythical Loch Ness Monster is more than likely a giant eel. An eel.
Okay.
Yeah. So researchers took DNA from each sample, compared it to the global DNA databases where they studied everything from the bacteria, the fish, and more. So, according to a geneticist, Professor Neil Jamel from the University of Otago, however you want to say it, in New Zealand, there was a significant amount of eel DNA that was found in the lake. And basically, since eels are very plentiful in Loch Ness, the eel DNA has been found pretty much at every location sampled, I should say, right? There were a lot of them.
Okay, in layman's terms, they found a lot of eel poop in their samples.
Yeah, so wherever they took the sightings from, in all 50 samples or more, they found eel samples. So what makes hundreds of... Okay, so this is where I have a problem with this whole thing.
Yeah.
How can they... Just because there's lots of eel poop or eel DNA in the water doesn't mean the Loch Ness Monster is a giant eel.
But the sheer quantity of eel sampling and eel genetic material, since they're kind of suggesting that it's inordinately high, maybe there's a chance that either there's a lot of eels or maybe there's some big giant eels putting their DNA and their poop all over the place. Does that make sense or sound like a sound theory?
No.
Okay.
Because over the years, divers have reported seeing eels that were as thick as their legs in the river.
Okay.
However, an eel being around 4 meters in size, or what is that, 16, 17 feet, whatever?
Math.
Yeah, no, it's European math, right? So if they found one like 16, 17 feet, and many sightings suggest that the creature is around that size.
13 feet.
Okay, 13 feet. It's kind of hard to believe, right?
Yeah. Well, no.
Okay, but if you see the idea that Loch Ness Monster is a giant eel would make sense for some of the sightings.
Okay.
Where it looks like an eel, or, something that's, long and you can't really see a head or anything. But what about the ones where you see freaking heads sticking out of the water?
Or flippers.
Yeah.
Like that one piece of evidence from like a decade ago where it was like a flipper in the water.
It looked like a flipper, right.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible, for something to grow that large there, I guess, if you're an eel, because eels eat all sorts of garbage and stuff like that, whereas like a plesiosaur or some kind of like prehistoric type creature that Loch Ness may be would have a hard time eating because there wouldn't be enough things in the loch to support it, unless it's eating eels, because there you go, they probably just picked out a food supply for it. But if it is a Loch Ness Monster or something like that, like a plesiosaur or something from that sort of that whatever prehistoric time it came from, if this thing doesn't stay in the water all the time and leaves the water to go eat, like sheep and cows or whatever it can find along the loch.
Which were the original sightings were out of water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The original sightings were, this thing would be seen and long neck would reach out and grab a sheep or dog or whatever and whoop it in the water and disappear.
Yeah.
Not just like putting around in the middle of the loch,
My biggest concern with the eel theory...
it is a plausible idea, but...
is that I have never seen an eel act in the manner of the Loch Ness Monster. That whole, bumps at the water surface.
Yeah.
I've never seen an eel naturally do that unless it was being caught, like when you're fishing for eel.
Or it could be, some kind of a mating thing going on. Maybe it's making it weird.
And even then, it doesn't do that up and down bumpy thing. I don't know how to describe that, but...
Undulation?
Yeah, undulation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. So, the eel theory, I don't know. I am kind of torn. This is showing that there's a lot of eels in this area.
Yes.
But it's also like the UK.
Now, if you do have these big giant eels, and the ones in the UK, remember, they're all high up on drugs.
Yes, we've talked about that.
Cocaine-addicted eels and stuff. Probably some meth in there too. But I mean, okay, so if you do see big giant eels, that would make sense, like I was saying, for some of the sightings, but not necessarily all the sightings. And, it looks like I don't know. What this evidence actually shows is that there's a large quantity of eel DNA.
Yeah.
They don't talk at all about the DNA they couldn't identify. Right?
Yeah.
So there you go.
They dismiss certain things, like we can't find any evidence of a creature that's remotely related to that, i.e. Loch Ness Monster, in our environmental DNA sequencing data. So I don't think there's a plesiosaur. So at most they tried to find plesiosaur DNA or genetic material relating to a plesiosaur.
Well, sure. But what if it's not?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's the whole thing.
And DNA sequencing is...
What if it's like a water horse instead?
Yeah. And see, that's my biggest thing with DNA sequencing that a lot of people who watch CSI have unrealistic expectations about. Not just with Lochness Monster or Bigfoot. You
Enhance.
don't... Yeah, exactly. You don't just throw a DNA test out and expect results. Oh, this came back a dog or a Bigfoot. You have to actually test the DNA against known samples. And it's not like it's like a known sample, like a phone book. You have to test it against sample groups.
Right.
So unless you understand the sample groups, like, oh, let's test against reptiles, let's test against baboons, you're not going to be able to figure out exactly what you have unless you already have a guess.
Yes.
Which is why it doesn't work for the cryptozoology world.
Yes.
So,
like, okay, I mean, you can test for canines, for example. That's great.
yeah.
If Dogman falls in the canine category, did you prove there's a Dogman?
No.
Because he's part of the canine family. So you'd wind
Yeah.
up finding some kind of weird outliers that would... So anyway.
And foxes. Foxes are technically rodents, but they look like dogs.
They're not like rodents.
Well, they're
felines.
They're feline, yeah.
Rodents.
Yeah.
Foxes are really rats.
No, but they're closer to a different, genetic breakdown. So, yeah. It's...
That's what they say. To me, foxes are dogs.
We're like skipping all over on known animals and
because,
trying to guess at cryptids.
Yeah, and we're not experts by any means,
we're not.
as I'm sure you can tell. But yeah, it's like the wait is over. Scientists reveal that their findings on the Loch Ness Monster is a giant eel. So they can guess pretty good. So what they did was they made a really scientific guess, just based off of the preponderance of the evidence, the fact that there is a lot of eel shit and DNA and stuff in the loch.
Watch your tongue.
I don't have to watch my tongue. Full-grown man, do what I want. Taxpayer. Yeah.
Eel poop.
Bought a microphone, pay for a podcast service. Can do whatever I want. No, I don't know. I mean, I can totally see people having seen giant eels, and that would explain a lot.
Yeah.
But it doesn't explain the sightings about the big long necks and everything else.
And
what would probably be more likely the case is what they actually found is big giant eels live in the Loch Ness.
Yeah.
Which means no swimming there. Even though it's already pretty cold, you probably don't want to swim in it anyway.
And avoid Twitter on this one. People are already fighting about this, just like the UFO stuff.
You know what happens when you have the nerd rage?
On the Twitters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing. So... Anyway, there you go. So if you're excited about the Loch Ness Monster, trying to find out exactly what it is, and you're not excited that it's an eel, leave us a comment below. You can contact us on Facebook, in our Facebook group.
CreepGeeks Podcast and
Yes.
CreepGeeks Facebook group.
Very nice. Yeah. So anyway, kind of moving through some of that terrible news. Excuse me, making all that noise there, Romy.
Still have a cold.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of NASA... NASA's investigating its first crime in space.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, NASA is investigating its first crime in space. Because you have an astronaut named McClane. I'm not going to say Anne McClane is related to John McClane, hero of the Nakatomi Plaza incident. Because, Anyway, there's a nice picture of her sitting there looking... inside the cockpit of the International Space Station with these computer screens and the windows and stuff. Right? Mm-hmm. So, this case kind of goes like this. And this is the first time that someone has been accused of committing a crime on board or aboard the ISS, International Space Station. So, astronaut Anne McClane, who returned to Earth on June 24th, following a 7-month stint in space, that's a long deployment, if you will, has been accused of accessing her former partner's bank account from the International Space Station.
Ouch.
Yes. And so she acknowledges that she did access the account, but denies any wrongdoing. Her estranged partner, Summer Warden, filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission claiming her bank account was accessed without permission.
Okay.
And a family member has also filed a separate complaint accusing McClane of identity theft. So this dispute seems to stem from the intertwined nature of the pair's finances.
Oh, no.
So according to her lawyer, Rusty Harden, McLean strenuously denies that she did anything improper and has been totally cooperating. Okay. In this day and age, it's kind of hard to say this is an actual crime.
Yeah.
You have your bank account.
Mm-hmm.
I have my bank account. We have joint accounts together. Right?
Yes.
So there's been times where you have checked my bank account and I have checked your bank account, or we've looked at each other's bank accounts. We've used each other's cards to buy things.
Yeah.
So if you got mad at me, you could say that I committed a crime and accessed your bank account. And if I got mad at you, I could do the same thing.
Yes.
So what I think we actually have here is not an actual crime.
Yeah.
I think somebody's a little butthurt and got mad about something.
Yeah.
So,
other articles are calling this a strained relationship or a estranged wife being upset over
yes.
trying to take care of finances.
And yeah, and in the grand scheme of things, where I've seen some pretty terrible things being in the military, as in the U.S. Navy, by God, being deployed out in the middle of nowhere, right? In the middle of the ocean and stuff, and you find all sorts of crazy stuff happens sometimes back home. I'll give you one example. One guy was out there being deployed. His wife decided she was done with him, moved to like Massachusetts, filed for divorce, right? Since he was not there to dispute anything, he had to pay like child support for children that weren't his. She opened up credit cards in his name. She did all this illegal stuff.
I bet she filed for the divorce in the wrong state, too.
Well, yeah, she filed it in Massachusetts, and he couldn't make it. He didn't know about it, and they weren't required to notify him, and he got raked over the coals. And when he tried to, say, hey, look, she opened up these accounts in my name, and I didn't authorize this. I wasn't even in the country. They said, well, she's your wife, and she can do that. And he was like, well, technically, no, we were divorced. And they were like, well, we're sorry. That's just how it happens. You'll have to figure out. And that happens all the time. Yeah. See, and it really is sort of one-sided that, a wife can do that. But if a husband tried to do that, he's going to be charged with a crime.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a thing. So I don't really know the full details.
Oh, it gets dirty in this other article.
I really don't want to get too dirty with it, but I don't think it's a crime like they're saying it's a crime.
But here's the thing.
Although if she is committed of it, then it would be a crime. And since it occurred when she accessed the account using the computers at space, which I bet they got really good internet up there,
What laws apply in space? Just like what laws apply in international waters?
I don't know.
So, technically, since we don't really have those laws in place or those regulations in space, you can't really charge her.
Well, no, but if she's like part of the government and follows the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which I don't think NASA does, she could be, written up for crimes unbecoming. Anyway.
Maybe accessing an account on a federal computer or federal device, but that's about it.
So, well, the good thing is that they're going to take care of the problem. And they're going to do that by sending up Russia's gun-toting robot.
Because that'll fix things.
So robots, and, why not, right?
Yeah.
So robots that we're talking about here, this particular robot is the one Russian robot that made pretty big attention by, being at a firing range and shooting a gun at a target. Which, wasn't ever really supposed to happen, from what I understand, if you look at Isaac Asimov's rules?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anyway, so the Russians didn't give a single crap about that, and they got this thing out there. They're like, oh, it's okay, he's learning self-defense. It's like, no. That's like a war robot, which wasn't supposed to happen. But anyway, this robot.
From Kazakhstan.
Yeah, who's known as the Borat 5000.
No, it's not.
No, actually, the robot's called Skybot F-850, and it's nicknamed Fyodor.
Okay.
He's going to spend 2 weeks on board the International Space Station so his creators can see how he gets it on in zero gravity. Yeah. But since he is trained in the use of firearms, I think they're sending up a basically non-humanoid RoboCop try to take care of some business.
Well,
it's sort of test him out so they can put him on board. He can be a cop. So anytime you get some jealous, interactions going on and possible illegal activity, old, Borat Bot 4000 or Skybot F850 can jump in there and take care of business.
Well, Frydor won't be bringing any weapons aboard the space station. First off, because
his hands are registered as deadly weapons, Tony.
I'm pretty sure that would break international law.
But is it international law? It's in space.
The ISS is supposed to be an international cooperation. So
they send up this, non-humanoid robot to take care of business, right? I mean, he's basically known. He's notoriously known for welding 2 automatic pistols and shooting at targets on the gun range. This man is trained.
And yes, he can operate a welding torch and everything in between.
See, they better take care of. They better straighten up there.
No,
I'm just saying they got RoboCop coming. Deputy Cop. They're sending old
Deputy Frydor.
Skybot F850
Fjordor.
Yes, he's like.
No, this is.
I can't think of what I was going to try to say what RoboCop said. Halt or whatever he said. I can't remember what he says there. But I thought that was pretty funny. They're going to send up old Russia's gun-toting robot. He flies up to the International Space Station. Something happened where he had to kind of like hang out in orbit for a while until they could bring him on board. Imagine that guy just kind of all balled up in a corner. And it's like, halt, a crime has been committed. Whoops out 2 automatic pistols. Telling you.
I don't know. We've seen some weird news out of Russia and some of those West European countries with robots that are less than genuine.
Yes. Robots and human man-pig.
Yeah. Well,
kind of hybrids.
Like the fake robot that was shot at certain angles and it turned out it was just a dude in a suit.
That was Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was supposed to be a competitor version of the Skybot 850 or something weird like that. It was some sort of thing where, and I think what it was, part of what it was is they have these robots that perform like in festivals and theme parks and stuff like that here, where it's a dude dressed up in a suit acting like a robot. I think that footage was that. But it got blown up as being, check out Russia's new advanced robots. Russia's got a pretty bad luck so far with a lot of their stuff going on. They got their hypersonic missile. Yeah. Well, that's one thing I was going to mention. So their hypersonic missile that blew up and the nuclear explosion that we talked about in one of our previous podcasts that happened in Russia wasn't caused by them trying to test the missile. The missile failed and went in the water.
Oh.
And so it actually detonated, from what I've read so far, when they were trying to actually retrieve the missile.
Oh, gosh.
So it's failed its test. Every time it's taken off, it hasn't gone well because the tiny little nuclear reactor that's supposed to give it the power to be able to fly indefinitely doesn't start. And so this time, they were going to retrieve it. And during the retrieval process, it detonated, and that's what killed the scientists and basically everybody on board. Sort of pretty much just vaporized them.
See, that's horrifying because...
Yeah. This is like, 15 miles off the coast or something like that? So
if they're having bad luck with these missile projection launches and these robots, what is the practicality or usefulness of this particular robot? I mean, yes, he can...
It's a robot. He can shoot guns, Omi.
But he's not supposed to be shooting guns on an international space station.
That's just it, though. Just because he can't doesn't mean that what if something gets on board and he's got to protect? This starts just like in the Alien movies, right? Where the synthoid or the biological robot causes the problems, right? It happened in the first.
I'm saying he could cause a problem.
The second. And if you look at it, since the Alien universe, right, in the movies ties into the Blade Runner universe, they had problems back then. So at the very beginning of all this, robots don't belong in space, especially when they're looking like humans.
That's my point. This robot shouldn't be up there. It could
be very useful if he needs to shoot stuff.
Which he shouldn't be shooting stuff on an international space station.
Well, yeah. I don't make the rules, man. Speaking of rules, the mysterious X-37B space plane breaks a new record.
Those are some rules.
Right. Yeah, because they had to... Okay. So the NASA... Oh, I shouldn't say the NASA. Once upon a time, NASA created the space shuttle. It was supposed to be this reusable entry vehicle, right? But it turned out to be super expensive and kind of deadly.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. Remember the shuttles kind of blew up a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
It was bad news, right?
Yeah.
I mean, overall, the idea was there, but they just wanted being more labor-intensive, more expensive to turn them around and get them back in space. So, somehow or another, NASA created like a pint-sized spacecraft. It looked just like a space shuttle, but it really wasn't designed to be handling humans or anything like that. It's more designed to go up and do payload and that kind of thing. Well, NASA stopped that program.
Oh.
Right? So they discontinued the project, and guess what? Who they passed it on to?
Who?
The government.
Oh.
So they turned it over to the Department of Defense back in 2004, 15 years ago. So this thing that they have been using, right, and it's small, it's designed to stay up in space for years.
Okay.
And so this solar-powered space plane, which just looks just like a miniature version of NASA's space shuttles, has been originally designed to repair satellites before NASA discontinued the project. They passed it on to DoD. This thing has been in space for 717 days nonstop.
Wow.
Now, since it's run by the government, Department of Defense, nobody really knows what this thing is doing up there. So they don't know about its like what specific nature and what the purpose of the X-37B is, other than it's basically just capable of spending years in orbit on a single mission without having to return to Earth. So in its latest mission, it's pretty much began about 2 years ago, September 7th, 2017.
Oh, wow.
This thing went up into space. So we're coming up on, actually by the time you listen to this podcast,
A 2-year anniversary.
yeah, it's the 2-year anniversary, and this thing broke a record. It's exceeded its previous record by staying up in space with a mission of 717 days, 20 hours, and 42 minutes. Wow. But what it's doing up there, nobody knows. But they do say that the primary objective of the X-37 Bravo is twofold. It's a reusable spacecraft, right? Yeah. And it has reusable spacecraft technology that it can use for the future of space and space technology. And it can also operate in experiments and things like that. And when it gets done, it can be returned to Earth, examined, checked out, and then the Air Force can send it right back up again. So the Air Force was actually asked about this spacecraft, as people do, and they kind of bring up different kind of things they don't know anything about. And, anyway, there's been like some sightings of a particular spacecraft possible that we're going to talk about in our next podcast. Yeah. But anyway,
imagine
here's its objectives, though. Let's say what they are, because this is what the Air Force says. The technologies being tested in the program include advanced guidance, navigation, control, thermal protection systems, avionics, high-temperature structure and seals, conformal reusable insulation, lightweight electromechanical flight systems, advanced propulsion systems, advanced materials, and autonomous orbital flight, reentry, and landing. So, in other words, that's just vague enough. This thing can be doing anything it wants up there.
And imagine that, though. This is an aircraft that can stay up in the air outside of what's going on down here on Earth. It can stay up there for such a long time.
Yeah.
It can pretty much land on an aircraft carrier.
If it needs to.
Refuel, and that aircraft carrier could be, again, international waters.
Sure.
And then it can just go up again.
I don't think it can take off on its own again. I think it has to be carried.
Really?
Yeah, I think it has to be piggybacked on a vehicle. The vehicle takes it up to where it can do suborbital launch, and then it launches and goes into space.
Wow.
But I mean, it basically can land. This is effectively it's a drone. Yeah. If you really look at it, sure, it can be controlled through other, but it can act. I'm sure it can act as a drone. We have the Predator drone. We have all sorts of crazy stuff. But
imagine that, though, if we had something that could basically just avoid everything that's going on down here.
Sure. It's probably already doing it.
I know.
It's probably packed full of our own version of Russia's gun-toting robot flying into space. So we got our own RoboCops up there.
Just waiting to land.
If that thing starts firing, boy.
Should things hit the fan.
Yep.
So, no.
So I thought that was pretty cool that this Mystery X-37B space plane breaks a new record, but Popular Mechanics did an article on it. So I clicked on that so I could read that too. And it says, everything we know about the Air Force's secret X-37B spaceplane.
Okay.
So it's like the space shuttle's smaller, younger brother. It's bullet-shaped, stubby wings, that kind of thing. Two-tone black and white appearance, just like the space shuttle. It's, of course, designed to do secretive, classified missions, right?
Yeah.
And let's go in here. So NASA began development of that small unmanned space plane in the mid-1990s, while simultaneously the Air Force was planning a similar craft called the Space Maneuver Vehicle. Interesting. So it was an 85% scaled-down version of the notional space plane. The X-40A flew one mission before it got loaned to basically to NASA. Okay, so here's when you're talking about the launch thing, right?
Yeah.
This particular test of the unpowered X-40A, when they went to test it, it was carried aloft by U.S. Army CH-47 Delta or Chinook 47 Delta helicopter. Yeah. Flew to an altitude of 15,000 feet and released it so it can glide right at a nearby landing strip. And so pretty much they carried out these multiple tests before it became part of the program, which eventually got turned over to the Air Force.
Yeah.
But they really don't say what its mission really is. But they've done these tests, and the tests have been carried out and had multiple missions and that sort of thing. And it became part of DOD, and really it's part of the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, otherwise known as DARPA.
Yeah.
So
this thing could be up there doing DARPA projects.
Oh yeah. Who really knows what this thing is actually doing?
Conspiracy tinfoil hat.
Well, that's part of it. It's like, what? What is this thing doing, right?
Yeah.
So when I was reading the Popular Mechanics article, it showed a pretty cool picture where they encased this thing in like two halves. You know, the way it sits on top of a rocket, it can be launched into space, and it kind of reminded me of.
Oh wow. A Kinder Egg.
Yeah, kind of sitting inside this Kinder Egg looking thing, just like when Elon Musk put his car in that sort of egg-shaped shell and then launched it up into space.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like that, which I think is actually went past Jupiter or something like that. So it makes it, this car has traveled the furthest, his car had traveled the furthest than any other car ever, like as far as distance-wise. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So way back in 2012, this X-37B carried out a total of 4 missions because evidently there's 2 of them. And so 2 of them so far have spent 2,086 days in orbit. Wow. And this current mission, which is the 5th mission, which is called OTV-5 or OTV-5, is the one that's got the longest orbit in to date, which was the 717 days. Yep. So it's not very big. This thing is like 29 feet long, roughly. Has a height of about 9 feet. Has a wingspan of 14 feet, so it's not very big, and it weighs about 11,000 pounds.
How long is the Albino Rhino?
Well, it's longer than our van. I think our van is actually 23 feet. So it's kind of like if you took an extended Mercedes Sprinter van, right, and put some wings on it, about 14 feet worth of wings.
In suborbital.
Yeah, so basically if you took the longest Mercedes I can't say it, Sprinter van. Yeah. And you extended it like widthwise by 20 inches on both sides. Yeah. Because the width is the 9. Okay, so it's 9 feet tall, and pretty much it's yeah. Yeah. So its width is okay. So if the Mercedes is about the same as our ProMaster, which is about 6 feet wide, has a wingspan of 14 feet. So you just add about 4 feet of space on both sides of it. It's like basically the same size as our Sprinter.
It's a Sprinter plus 2 highway lanes.
Yeah, so it's like a long ProMaster / Sprinter / yeah. And they just shoot that thing up into space.
Somebody shoot that up there with hashtag van life.
Well, it's kind of funny, right? Because the X-37B has been described as a pickup truck with a payload measuring 7 feet by 4 foot wide. About the size of a truck bed. Huh. So you can't even put a sheet of plywood in there, man. If you get a standard 4x8 sheet of plywood, it's not going to fit.
So this works in suborbital space, but not a trip to Lowe's.
Pretty much. Yeah. Because we support Lowe's because Lowe's supports our veterans. Yes. Yeah. So basically,
just don't take your spaceship there.
They built a camper. They built a van. They sent a little cargo van up into space. But they still don't really say what it does. So, I don't know. But they do say it can act as an on-orbit sensor platform. I think, like a lot of the other people that are out there that have been taking a look at this thing, is that this thing is, can be loaded full of spy stuff, and it can basically snoop anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So, and it could be launching technology for weapons so they can do like anti-satellite attacks, all sorts of crazy stuff. And so, since some of these satellites aren't very big that they'd have to launch, they can put it in the back of this pickup truck and just launch it up there, right?
Yeah.
The anti-satellite weapon can unfurl itself and do its job because it doesn't really take a whole lot. And especially if they're using like kinetic weapons, which they can run into stuff. Who knows? So it could be anti-satellite weapon carrier, satellite inspection vehicle. It could be a platform for grabbing malfunctioning satellites and bringing them home. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It could be a platform for grabbing satellites that if it goes into the atmosphere, it could be super bad, and you just put it back in there and kind of bring it back to Earth. So, but they're saying it's probably the least likely use of the X-37 Bravo is that it's a weapon or weapons carrier. Yeah. I don't know. Some have suggested that the X-37B itself can track targets across the globe within minutes of the decision to attack, possibly carrying a thermonuclear bomb. So, yeah, I don't know. But then they're saying, well, hey, if that happens, it'd be a pretty easy target to hit. But here's what I like, okay? Because I didn't really know too much about this until I was reading up a little bit. Another concept is that this spacecraft is a carrier and launch vehicle for the so-called rods of God. It's a theoretical, why can't I talk today? A theoretical, how do you say that?
Theoretical.
That's what I said. Weapon system that consists of tungsten bars with a guidance system. On command, these rods deorbit, right, and slam into targets at hypersonic speeds using kinetic energy to do tremendous damage. Yeah. So they can launch the rods of God and direct them to a target. And I mean, think about this. If you threw a rock at somebody at 17,000 miles an hour, it doesn't have to be a big rock to do a lot of damage. Because it's kind of using the same sort of meteorite sort of theory. You can take a meteorite size of a golf ball, and when it hits the earth, it
makes a giant crater.
Yeah. Kind of the same thing. And they would use these tungsten rods, man, which are like super heavy and dense. Cause a pretty big impact. Yeah. So anyway, they don't really know what this thing does. So according to Popular Mechanics, it does a bunch of stuff. It doesn't do anything at all. They don't really know.
Just vague enough to have us nervous.
Yeah. No, yes. It was just vague enough to have us interested.
Yeah.
Like, ooh. But they do have a nifty little animation, though. So, there you go. Yeah. So now you know more about the X-37B as put out by us.
Yes.
At the CreepGeeks Podcast, where we know just a little bit more than you don't. Not much. But not for that.
Just enough for you to have to use the links that we provide in the show notes to every episode.
Absolutely.
If you have more questions about that, click on those links.
Absolutely. South Carolina's got a terrible problem, Omi.
And I do want to thank, before we get into this, Strange Carolinas for sharing this on their social media, because since moving here to the East Coast, we have used a lot of the cool ideas and posts from Strange Carolinas.
I did not know that.
Yes. This came from Strange Carolinas. They broke this article, as well as Mental Floss. And this problem in South Carolina,
so did it come from Mental Floss first and went to Strange Carolinas?
I
we'll
think
never know.
Yeah. But this is a pretty serious problem. South Carolina coroner swears local Dairy Queen burgers are not made of human flesh.
Yes.
What? This is a little disturbing because...
Actually, it's not. And I'll explain why it's not disturbing.
Okay.
After you tell everybody why the coroner has to say, hey, everybody.
But this gets kind of complex and pretty convoluted.
Well, it's just nuts and bolts it.
Okay. So about a week or two ago, the FBI, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and state law enforcement officials raided several businesses in South Carolina's Greenwood, Aveville, and Orangeburg counties, with the Greenwood Dairy Queen being one of them. The officials were acting on a complaint that 2 men were operating an unlicensed money transmitting business, and they did reportedly find $200,000 in an unlocked safe at the Greenwood Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
Though the name of the DQ's manager, Saif Momin, came up in the initial investigation into the financial crime, authorities have made it clear that Momin has not been charged with the crime, nor were any of his 18 employees in any way connected to the raid. But none of that is the strange part of the story. In the wake of the raids, dozens of rumors began flying about what the FBI was looking for in the local ice cream franchise. That's when a corporate inspector informed Momin that in what appears to be a separate incident, someone had lodged a complaint about human meat being inside a burger at that Dairy Queen. And it didn't take long for social media to catch on, and using Twitter as a platform for confirming whether or not there was Soylent Green-like situation happening in South Carolina.
The Twitter.
Yes.
If you ever want to blow up stupidity, Twitter's the way to go.
Yeah. And it shows a screenshot of that Twitter post. Hey, Dairy Queen, do y'all use human meat at your Greenwood, South Carolina location?
Yes.
Yeah. And Dairy Queen had to reply, "Hi, Matthew. At Dairy Queen, we are very proud of our 100% beef hamburgers. We serve high-quality hamburger with no additives or fillers." So even after that, though...
They're like, oh, hey, yeah, no, we don't use hamburger. Or human hamburger.
The public outcry continued through a local news outlet, newspaper, required the expertise of Greenwood County coroner Sonny Cox, who was taken aback by the question itself. He's like, "I promise you, I've never had anything of that nature ever asked of me," Cox said.
Yes.
"I've never suspected anything like that. I can honestly say that's the first I've heard of it, and I don't see any validity in that claim at all.
Yes.
There's little or no chance of anything like that ever to happen."
You know what, though? Yeah. Anytime somebody says, hey, that tasted pretty weird, he's going to think about that.
He is.
Absolutely. I would. Wouldn't you?
I know.
You're like, huh.
But I want to know how that complaint started. Did somebody it really start on Twitter, or did somebody...
You know how they have like these little, hey, how was our service?
Yeah.
And you get like a free hamburger? Mm-hmm. So somebody probably logged in, took a little survey, and then it said basically, you know, what can we change or whatever, and they're like, you know, did my hamburger have human meat in it?
Or this burger tasted like...
Long pig, which is humans, right?
It tasted like butt.
Yeah. Tastes like human ass. So pretty much, I thought that was pretty funny that they actually had to come out and say, hey, we don't serve you know, human meat. But when I was a little kid, this is way back in the 70s, back during the fast food wars, which were evidently a thing, right? There used to be Jack in the Boxes all around Hampton Roads.
Yeah.
Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Hampton, Newport News, all those places. There were Jack in the Boxes everywhere. And then all of a sudden, they just kind of went away. And there was a couple different rumors. One was that people had died from eating tainted meat, like salmonella or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was like conspiracy. But then the sub-conspiracy was that they had to leave because they got caught serving tainted meat that wasn't tainted with salmonella. It was human meat.
See, I heard...
So I remember I was like 9 or 8 years old or whatever, hearing that in schools, like they were serving people meat.
See, I heard something different. I heard...
You weren't even born when this happened.
No, because I was a kid, and I had relatives who loved Jack in the Box.
Who talked about the great fast food wars.
And they said that the reason Jack in the Box didn't exist in most of Virginia was because one location had an E. coli issue.
That's what it was. It was like salmonella E. coli, but it was really tainted human meat.
And that one location made everybody in the community really sick. Now, while they tried
and by really sick, it was like 8 people.
Yeah. While they tried to fix the situation, the PR damage was so bad.
Yeah, that they just pulled out.
That's what I heard.
That's more than likely what really happened. But when I was a kid in school, all Stranger Things style was like, what? They're serving human meat. So, yeah.
So, I don't know. To me, as a kid, I was like, ew, E. coli? You mean they purposely left their food on a dirty counter?
You mean somebody crapped in the meat?
That was mortifying enough for me as a kid. So, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. So, I can understand how they would have to address something like that. And I'm sure it blew up. And I don't even know if there's a way to find out, exactly what the real reason was why. It was probably just crappy sales because when I was little, the fast food wars were kind of a real thing, man.
Yeah.
You had to like pick your poison. It was like, did you like McDonald's or were you a Burger King fan or did you eat at Taco Bell? I mean, it was crazy because they just, especially in our area, it just kind of blew up.
Yeah.
In the early to sort of late 70s into the 80s, fighting these, like you had to, pick your favorites and where you went and, fast food was a thing,
And see, my family was
I used to love Burger King.
My family was a McDonald's family.
You better get out.
And
get
the reason,
out right now.
But the reason we were a McDonald's family is because there was always a McDonald's in almost every Navy base hospital.
Well, of course.
And since I was so sick back then, that's what we did.
But I mean, we're talking, that's past. Yeah. That's past the
But
fast
even
food
after
wars,
that, we were loyal to friggin' McDonald's. And then...
McDonald's. I mean, but there were like a bunch of places that sort of popped up. These were kind of like one-off places. Like there was like a Fin and Feather or something like that where they served like fish and chips and chicken.
Oh, yeah. They still have one of those in Chesapeake.
It was called like Scotsman's or something like that. There was just a bunch of these weird sort of like fast food joints that sort of popped up real quick. But then later on, right, after most of that had been played out, delivery pizza started.
Yeah.
And then it became a different animal altogether, because, it was kind of a thing. Because you didn't eat fast food all the time back in those days. You ate them on like paydays and stuff because it's still, it was still way cheaper to go ahead and make your own food than it was to actually go buy the food,
We got food at the house.
Exactly. And that's a sad thing when you become an adult, when you drive past like Chick-fil-A or Taco Bell,
And you're like.
And you go, man, I'm going to go in there and get a hamburger. You're like, nope, we got food at the house. Yeah. And then you get home and realize you got to cook it, or somebody has to cook it. Like, man, I could have ate a hamburger.
But that's why millennials have things like Grubhub and stuff like that,
Yeah.
So, but everybody
bring
thinks
you your grub.
Everybody thinks that these big old meme flare-ups and internet wars right now, like between Popeyes and Chick-fil-A, are new. No, the fast food wars. I think wasn't there a documentary?
Oh yeah,
about the fast food wars from when you were growing up.
And it was like, depending on which one you frequented, so you had your sort of like which one you like, which was your whatever popular choice. But it would even get down to like, Burger King is, promoting, like the drink glasses. You get like collectible glasses.
Yeah.
Like Empire Strikes Back. And they had like glasses 1 through 8. And you could only get them during certain times. And sometimes you'd have to drive to all these different freaking Burger Kings or McDonald's or whoever was, doing it, right?
Yeah.
To try to find glass number 4. And you go through the drive-thru and your dad would go, do you have glass number 3? And like, no, we only have 2s. And you're like, oh, because they actually sold these drink glasses, man, these collectible glasses. And I remember that. It's like, okay, number 4 was like Boba Fett or something stupid like that. It was like, what?
Yeah.
And you were trying really hard. I think they even did it for Return of the Jedi. So I missed that. They should bring that back where you could get like, but now they have these little cheesy Happy Meal toys and stuff like that. So.
You can't say that though, because they have brought that back in certain incarnations. And the best incarnation of it would be the Beanie Babies. Remember the Beanie Babies?
Beanie Babies are... No, I'm talking about like something
McDonald's,
useful.
And people would be like, I'm going to be rich. I have 200 of these. And they're worth like $20 now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, well, because Beanie Babies, that sort of went away. But a drinking glass is useful.
True.
You can get like Boba Fett and
but that
Jabba the Hutt.
Consumerism, that collectible consumerism thing, it backfires, which is why we have these crappy toys in the Happy Meals now.
Well, I just think it's because they're just getting super cheap.
So,
and that's like with McDonald's. McDonald's, for a long time, is trying to make stuff absolutely as cheap as possible. And the funny thing that I was sort of thinking about the other day is like Hardee's or Carl's Jr., which is the same thing. They went the other way. When everybody was going super cheap and 99-cent menus and stuff like that, those guys released like an Angus burger.
Yeah.
A $6 hamburger. And people are like, what? You're never going to survive. And I think they're doing just fine.
Like a super chicken breast sandwich.
Yeah, it's like $9.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap. But it kind of is what it is. But yeah. There you go. So the Dairy Queen that's in that little part in South Carolina, it's real meat, bro. Don't worry. It's not human.
If we end up in South Carolina in that area this year, we should go to that Dairy Queen.
Oh, I'm sure they've never heard that. So you got to be careful because some places in South Carolina, they're super country like North Carolina. You probably get something.
Hey, we talked about you guys on our podcast.
They're like, no, baby, it's not. It's real. And you're gonna get like a spit burger. That's what you're gonna get. I'm like, man, this tastes a little weird.
But speaking of showing up in South Carolina, I do want to again mention Carolina Paracon.
Yes,
we're gonna be heading up there in October.
Yes.
So be sure to check out our interview. We posted that in one of our previous podcast episodes, and you can check them out on Facebook. We have links to Carolina Paracon as well as Toby and Tony Afterlife Paranormal and their official Facebook page.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, one thing left to talk about on the podcast.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to talk about it, you can go ahead and talk about it right now.
Okay. And this is just a continued update from one of my friends.
Yes, because remember the last podcast we talked about what?
We kind of skipped it, but the one before that we talked about little people.
Yes. So this is a continuation of little people from on the reservation.
Yeah, in South Dakota.
Which is funny because it's not actually funny because we actually have sort of talked about that before, but Mysterious Universe have also. Mysterious Universe talked about this too. About little people in South Dakota and how it seems to be a really prevalent thing in that particular area of South Dakota.
Yeah, well, this is very specific to a lot of this activity involves my friend and a lot of her family members, cousins, just a lot of people in your tribe end up basically being your cousin. So this is a lot of people in her community that she's known for most of her life. And specifically, this is Grass Mountain, the Pine Ridge Reservation, and the Rosebud Res. And the story that my friend sent me was that when she was in high school, I spent the night in Grass Mountain on the Rosebud Reservation at a friend's house. When it was time for bed, we gathered up our stuff and headed upstairs to the addition or add-on. A lot of the ways these reservation houses are set up is they're usually a very simple single-story residence, but residents have the ability to cleanly
they can make additions.
Build an addition on top of them. And what happens is usually the whole family goes up to the second story during certain seasons or just all the time. So the whole family headed up for bed onto the upper addition. When she got to the large room on the addition, I noticed a latch with a padlock on the inside. When I asked what it was for, when I asked what it was for, they told me it was to keep the little men out. I thought they were crazy and I started asking questions. They said these little men live around the river which ran behind the home. That these little men were mischievous and dangerous little thieves who would take food and other things from their home and the property. Sure enough, in the middle of the night, I could hear banging downstairs. I woke my friend who quickly hushed me and whispered, "It's them. It's the little people. They'll leave soon." Now, the next morning, she woke up late, but as she came down the stairs, her friend's parents were busy shutting cabinet doors and tidying up the kitchen. Now, her brother's ex-wife has family from the same area in Grass Mountain, and they've seen small footprints around the house that lead to the river, and they hear them rummaging through the house and through like various storage sheds at night. I've asked her and her friends and her family if they get any pictures of the little people footprints or anything out of sorts to please send them. And the same goes to anybody else in the Southwest and the upper Northwest. If you have like little people stories or even some evidence, send it to us. We'd love to see it and share it with our listeners.
Yeah.
I mean, she went into detail about this experience, and it I kind of abbreviated it for the podcast, but she described, it sounded like little humans, like little...
Yeah, like little people.
Like slamming doors and knocking stuff. It was like something was ripping apart her kitchen.
Yeah, and they're rummaging around trying to find some stuff.
And you would go, okay, this is a remote rural area. Maybe raccoons got into the house, or maybe... some sort of animal. If that were the case, when they went downstairs, they would have found, raccoon poo.
Yeah.
Or possum poo, or even a possum. And that's not the case. This happens to these families kind of often.
Yeah. I actually watched the video on YouTube where they're talking to a Lakota elder from a different tribe, same sort of area there in South Dakota. And she basically talked all about little people growing up, and how they would steal things and stuff like that. And that her grandmother, actually her great-grandmother who lived with them and stayed in the kitchen because she was prone to being, cold.
Yeah.
And that's where the big stove was, the cooking stove, heating stove was in the kitchen. She talked about how her grandmother was, or I think it was her great-grandmother, was really mad that the little people were stealing scraps of cloth and stuff that she would use.
Yeah.
So she would take her cast-off scraps and give them to, her great-granddaughter, who would make little things out of them and stuff like that. But so she'd set these, little pretty pieces of cloth out, like little remnants or whatever, so she could make stuff. Mm-hmm. And they kept taking them.
Oh.
And then she brings it up that it was like 5 months later or something like that. She was sleeping and something kept, brushing her face, and she kept thinking it was like a bug or something like that.
Yeah.
And when she opened up her eyes, it was a little man basically wearing a little, regular proportioned man, little person, wearing a bright red jacket with a beard, and that red jacket was made out of the cloth that her great-grandmother had.
Oh, man.
And so she had like a whole bunch of stories like that. And one of the ways that, she would look at him and see him, and one of the things that you could do is, or one of the things that she did to scare him off was, if she was laying there watching him, they wouldn't really pay her no mind. But if she opened up her eyes like really wide and stared at him really hard, it freaked them out and they ran away. But what she said was kind of crazy is that one experience that she had was that when it went to run away,
mm-hmm.
it turned into a stick and just floated away.
Oh.
And one other experience she said is that when she, noticed a little person noticed her, and she flared her eyes real big, it turned into a leaf and just basically ran away. So,
that's very common for little people encounters.
And she's like in her 70s or something in the video. But it was just kind of funny, and she was telling a story about how one of the little people, because she had twin brothers or twin cousins, I can't remember, and they were sleeping, outside in a teepee, and that one of the little people were throwing like rocks at them, like sand, to try to get them, I guess, to stop snoring or whatever they were doing, And when she noticed that and it seen her, it did the same thing. It turned into a stick and flew away, and it was the same one. And she also talked about how they would make nests in the cross, like you make a teepee and the sticks that make up the teepee, and they would make little nests up there. And sometimes if you seen like leaves and sticks and stuff like that, it was really them.
And you're supposed to leave those alone.
Yeah, because if you see them, they turn into things that aren't them. But if you see them out of the side of your eyes, kind of a thing, then you could see them as what they are. So it's kind of a strange thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was kind of.
And that was a Lakota
funny.
elder?
Yeah. Huh. So it was pretty neat listening to her talk. And we have such terrible internet. It took a long time to watch that video. The video was like 5 minutes long, but it would buffer. And it took me like 25 minutes to watch it. And I was like,
And it's funny. I talked to this person just, we made friends when we lived in New Mexico, and we talked about.
I wouldn't be surprised if she knew. I mean, especially the elders there. I'm not sure exactly where this Lakota elder was.
But Pine Ridge. It's going to be. It's going to be
Dakota. So.
Yeah, it's going to be Pine Ridge or Rosebud or Grass Mountain, because the Lakota, a specific group of the Lakota Sioux are on those reservations.
Well, they didn't really say exactly. So, I mean, I don't know, but
Yeah, and it's funny because we talk about. We bonded over living in remote places when I lived in New Mexico.
Yes.
So she kind of relates to the whole no internet and.
Oh, and she also talked about how she wouldn't go to the springs. They had like a little creek river spring. Yeah. She would not go after dark. So because they didn't have any running water, so she had to go get water fetch water every day.
Yeah.
And she said, if it even looked like it was getting dark, they would run to get water, and then it would run back, and they would not be there after dark.
And see, that's kind of a rule that they have on one of the reses. Don't go get water after dark.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily because of the little people. It's because, and this was something I wasn't going to totally bring up, but it's the fact that there's a certain ridge that you can look at from the reservation. And that ridge has on a few occasions had like a Phoenix Lights type incident. And those lights go towards the river. So that's
Could also
why
be
you don't
that
go
since
there.
a lot of nocturnal type predators go out there, you don't want to get lost.
Well,
or
true. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird. So whatever I guess it takes to keep your kids from going out in the dark and going down by the river.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was kind of funny. So very nice. So there you go. If you've been listening to CreepGeeks Podcast so far and you stuck it out, thank you very much. It has been a long time since we've done a podcast this particularly long, but that's okay. We do appreciate all the support.
Yeah.
But at this point, I think we're going to basically stop talking and end this podcast.
And if you didn't get enough podcasts for this evening, I do want to let you guys know you can check out Chasing Night Shadows on September 8th. Our friend Nathan and I guess guest Gene McCauley, they're going to do their first ever live broadcast.
Well, I don't know. Is it their okay, they're going to do their first
That's what
podcast.
they said. Live broadcast.
Oh, first ever live. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And we put a link to that in the show notes.
Yes, very nice.
So be sure to check out Chasing Night Shadows.
Yes, indeed.
Now, if you'd like to reach out to the podcast again, the email address is going to be contact@creepgeeks.com, or support the show, listen to the show, subscribe to the podcast, and give us a call if you'd like, 575-208-4025. If you have any questions about this episode, be sure to check the show notes or hit us up on Facebook.
Yes. Very nice.
And that's pretty much it. Be sure to check the events tab on our Facebook page. We have a full 2 months of events that we are going to be at, and it gives you the opportunity to see us in person.
Yes. Very nice.
Yep.
So, anyway, there you go. So I do appreciate you listening to the podcast, and we're going to be having a little announcement here in about a month. That might make things a little interesting for you. So, anyway, you've been listening to the podcast. Thank you very much. But we're going to shove off. So, see you later. Take it easy. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Shots through my chest as you watch me bleed. Every kick, drum, hit is a symphony. Every brush of your curves is the air I breathe. You speak, I am listening. Sweat rolls, girl, you're glistening. Slow-mo, pull me into the light, the light. There are people watching us, wishing they were obvious. Instead of giving into the fright, the fright. Yeah. 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 Yeah.